Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Marlene Vides. Like most of you already know, I am the owner of Only Escrow and an escrow professional for over 25 years. We're excited to kick off our first of three business escrow classes with none other than Michael Spalding, an expert in business escrows and one of the most engaging and entertaining trainers out there. Please hold off questions until the end. But if you also want, you can put the questions on the chat, in the chat below. From all of us at Only Escrow, we truly appreciate you being here. And I'm going to let Michael take over now. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Marlene. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I wanted to take you through this webinar today about guiding people through the transactions of businesses, especially with mom and pop transactions. This is different from franchising. So if you have a franchisor deal, we'll discuss that in a different seminar. This is more for geared toward like your simple mom and pop started a business, ran a business for so long, and now they wish to sell it. Okay. Some things I'm going to point out on the agenda. I just want to give you an idea of what we're going to be speaking about today, itemizing out the information, Q&As at the end, as Marlon had mentioned. A little bit of an introduction. As Marlon mentioned, I'm Michael Spalding, also known as Mikey. I've been in the industry for 24 years. I started as an escrow officer in Woodland Hills, worked my way up, and in 2007, when the market crashed, I really didn't know what to expect in real estate, so I had to diverse my portfolio as an escrow officer. So I learned how to do mobile homes, business escrows, liquor licenses, probates, and other types of facets of escrow. So that way I became a full roundabout escrow officer rather than just focusing on residential, commercial, and real property. So I really appreciate you guys taking your time to be here today. So number one, the first thing we want to talk about is determining what type of business escrow we are going to be handling. We, as Only Escrow, have our E&O insurance that protects us against an asset sale. An asset sale deals more about the goodwill, fixtures, furniture, equipment, and the name of the business, which is more what we do for transferring of one buyer to a seller of the actual business itself. When we speak about a stock or a sharehold sale, this is more geared towards if the seller is ABC LLC or ABC Inc. And ABC LLC or ABC Inc. are selling that business Inc. Corp to another buyer. This I highly recommend going through a real estate attorney because there could be more in that business that the people are going to inherit other than just what is currently showing for the business itself. So the entity is more being sold in a stock share sale versus a asset sale. Okay. All right, some things to consider. The taxations and the liabilities between an asset sale and a stock sale. The differences are very simple. Buyers can kind of take control of the business and they only get taxed on the fixtures, furniture, and equipment in an asset sale. When they're dealing with stock and trade and taxational purposes, you're going to talk about the entire items that are located on the actual stock or the entity itself. The entity could hold more than just that business again. So there could be other fees and costs associated. Plus, they could also have business tax sales, personal property tax sales. They could also have other items as far as taxation is concerned. Liability in this. The asset sale is very scrubbed clean. We actually do a search and publication that gives us a full itemization like a preliminary title report would for real property. So it gives us what everything is going on with that seller and that business because we want to make sure when that buyer inherits that business, it's a clean business. It's not holding on to a judgment or it's holding on to some sort of liability that either the landlord or the seller had placed upon it. You would be surprised at how many people go, oh, I totally forgot about that COVID relief thing I did, and now I'm selling this business and I need to pay off that COVID with SBA. Some other things that you may want to consider about as far as complexity, right? The complexity of a sale can involve multiple facets of negotiation. An asset sale, again, we're going to talk about three things in an asset, right? Goodwill, fixtures, furnitures, equipment, and of course, if there's inventory or even a liquor license, right? If there is inventory, inventory is a separate entity to itself or a separate item on the asset sale. So the inventory can be either sold with the total purchase price or on top of the purchase price. That has to be disclosed up front to the buyer because the buyer needs to be aware. Do I need to go get my own vendors, my own food if it's a restaurant, or my own alcohol if it's a bar? They need to make sure that they have the ability to operate on day one. So a lot of people, depending on how you structure your sales, it can go from either being a inventory included on the purchase price or inventory on top of the purchase price. Now, again, I do as an escrow holder of Only Escrow, we only do asset sales. And the reason why is because it's a simple cookie cut, hey, look, it's just this business we're concerned with. We're not concerned about the entire booklet of what that entity holds in a stock and trade. And again, a stock and trade is something that I would really have an attorney handle because you've got to make sure all the stocks are signed off correctly, that it's transferred correctly, that there's nothing lingering, because if there is anything lingering, it can fall back on that buyer for successor liability, which is something that the buyer needs to be very well aware of, is successor liability. So how would you prepare yourself for this business, right? So you need to get yourself together. I tell people that the best way to find value in a business is to look at the tax returns of that seller's gross for the last 3 years. Big secret there, because a lot of people try to look on LoopNet. A lot of people try to look on other facets. And just so you guys know, LoopNet is the MLS for business. So FYI, you can look up LoopNet for all commercial properties, real property, or businesses. Or if you wish to list, you can put them on that LoopNet, which will be much more exposure to that world rather than trying to put it through the MLS or put it through another, like, I don't know, Craigslist. You'd be amazed at where you can actually put this information, but LoopNet is one of the big high ends, if you will. But when determining the value, you need to make sure that you look at the 3 years gross and then you find the average. That's usually what the purchase price is of that lovely business. Now, you can, a buyer can always buy for what they feel it's worth, right? And that's really what the value of something is what someone's willing to purchase it at. And you got to remember something, the goodwill alone is something like a computer, right? You build a computer from Best Buy, goodwill is just, what the name of the cloud of the business. So if you were building that computer from Best Buy and you only cost you $600 to build it, great. But the moment you slap on Apple, the moment you slap on Microsoft name, it went from a $650 machine to a $2,000 machine. Why? It's the same stuff because of the name behind it, the goodwill behind it. When facilitating business evaluations, again, you're going to want to look at stuff. You want to make sure that the seller kind of knows what they've got going on. You want to get a fixtures, furnitures, and equipment list to make sure that you have all the fixtures, furnitures, and equipment that are going to be sold with the business. You're not going to turn around and just assume that everything that's there is being sold. You could have a jukebox that's renting. You could have a POS system that's rented by the seller directly from their bank, so that way it goes direct to them, and that may have to be returned, or there may have to be a buyout, which the buyer may or may not want to do. Organizing operational details. So when formulating all this, again, fixtures, furnitures, equipment list is ideal because it gives you an itemization of what's being sold with that business. Typically, I try to ask the buyer, if the buyer were to walk into that business, what would they sell? What would they buy those fixtures and furnitures and equipment for if that's all they're buying? And the reason why you want to make sure of that is because the buyer is going to pay sales tax on that furniture, fixtures, and equipment list amount. And that is coming from the buyer side. So FYI, you want to make sure that list is nice and tidy, and you also want to make sure that the buyer gets a copy of that so the buyer can allocate what the fixtures, furnitures, equipment amount they're willing to purchase it at. Along with that, you also want to make sure we have our California Department Fee and Tax Administration. There's something called, that is actually a license that hangs on their wall. It's a number that's on there. It's not the seller permit, big difference there. You have a seller permit from California Department Fee and Tax Administration, and you have a seller permit from the city. City, not so much we care about, and the reason why is because that buyer has got to get that licensing from the city direct. And that is either within the first 30 days of operation or the first 45 days of operation. Check with your local city to find out exactly what is needed. When dealing with leases, you also want to start that engagement with the landlord, especially as a realtor, because one of the biggest hangups is the landlord. The landlord doesn't really want to talk to escrow. We're a third party to them. They want to talk to that buyer. They want to have that buyer fill in an application. They want that buyer to go through the rigmarole. And then we need to, as an escrow company, we need to decide and hear, are they getting a new lease? Or are they going to be subleasing, or are they going to take over the lease? There's three different types of lease structures there. So you need to get with the landlord when you're listing this property to find out how they are going to operate and what they will need from the buyer and how long it will take them to get that approval. Some landlords take anywhere between 15 to 21 business days for that approval. I do recommend very highly as a listing agent on that. Make sure that your seller understands if there's any fees or any prepayment, if you will, for that landlord for breaching that lease or removing themselves off that lease. That buyer may have to take over that lease, or the landlord may say, hey, I don't want anything to do with this until your lease completes, so now you're at a sublease situation. And then you got to check with the landlord, do they allow sublease, right? Another big thing about all this is also your employment development department. Is your seller having employees? This is a scary conversation to be having with your seller when he's selling his business. And the reason why is because that seller may also have his mom, his brother, his kids, all working at the business, but it's not the owner. The owner is the only person exempt from EDD. If mom worked there, his wife worked there, kids worked there, everyone, whoever was not owner worked there, they are employees. They do get employee tax. They can come audit that. And that can put your file further behind in closing, because one of the biggest things we need from the Franchise Tax Board, EDD, and California Department of Tax Administration are clearances. And without those clearances, buyer will inherit, but seller will get no money until we get them in. Another big thing about streamlining all this is to simply talk to us. Tell us that you're getting ready to open or take a listing on a business. We can give you a pre-escrow on that. We can put structure stuff together, ask for items, talk it over. Some businesses like what's a good business? Coin laundry, not fluff and fold, just a straight coin laundry. There are fixtures, furnitures, and equipment there, right? All the machines, all the tables, the prepping, the chairs. But because those don't derive any kind, because those are working machines for the service, they actually don't get a sales tax. Believe that. So depending on the type of business that this person is selling will have different caveats. And remember, in real estate, everyone, no rule is final. Every rule has subject to change based upon its given situation. So now that we're kind of got with the landlord, now that we've got our paperwork from our seller, we kind of know what's going on. How do we broach this to the buyer, finding a qualified buyer? Again, number one thing is to get supported documentation like you would in a simple transaction with real estate, right? You want to make sure, can the buyer afford it? Is the buyer getting a loan? Does he qualify? There are very much a lot of identifying qualifiers for getting a loan with SBA. And one of the biggest problems, again, is the landlord. You want to make sure that buyer and that landlord are making sense. If that landlord's telling you this is a no-go, that buyer needs to get kicked out. You need to go find yourself a new buyer, because why is this buyer going to buy a business he can't operate in the structure it's currently located in? And that in itself is also goodwill. Um, you want to create a CIM, what we call a confidential information memorandum, because you want to hand over information to this lovely buyer, right? You want to give them an opportunity, but you don't want people to know that Bob's selling, Bob's selling this great business that everyone knows, right? Microsoft's selling. No one wants to know Microsoft. They don't want anybody to know that Microsoft is selling. So you may have to get a confidential information addendum just to make sure that the buyer keeps that secret and make sure that no one else knows, because maybe he has employees. He doesn't want to let his employees know that he's selling the business, because employees get nervous, employees quit. That could become a bigger issue there. All of a sudden the business is going into the ground because he doesn't have the staff to support the business, and that's all because he wished to sell and the cat got out of the bag. Buyer screening process. As escrow, we don't get involved in this part of the process, right? When you guys are taking in the buyer and trying to get that offer and trying to get all that good information. But we do want to provide to you that you guys want to make sure that you get the non-disclosure agreement and the CIM, because this two items really do protect your seller. And it also gives the buyer opportunity to really take a look at the business before they engage. I've seen it many times where they've opened escrow, started to look at the business and go, oh, this is not what I want, and cancel. Now they've wasted your time, the buyer's time, or the seller's time, the landlord's time, and escrow's time. So a successful transaction requires careful negotiation beyond just the sales price, right? Again, managing offers and letters of intent. Letters of intent are important because you want to know what the buyers really want to hand over to you. Guide your clients through the reviewing and responding to LOIs. That's something, again, agents, that you need to make sure that you're kind of keeping up with, and who, because you may have 4 or 5 different buyers all interested, not yet presenting an offer. So you want to make sure that they are giving you information and you are following up with that information. Preparing your clients for the buyer's due diligence. So the buyer has opportunity, right? He may have already been in that business, sat in that seat, ate that food, drank that drink, and then turned around and said, hey, I want to buy this, or hey, I don't want to buy this. So you want to make sure that when the seller's getting ready to go on to market, he really turns up the volume on that. He really turns up the volume on customer service, turns up the volume on food quality, he turns up the volume. And the reason why is because you're selling this business. You want it to put its best face forward always. Negotiating critical terms. Again, back to the non-compete agreement. I mean, that's something that I would be very leery to even offer to anyone unless they were, I wouldn't give anything information about the business until they had something in writing saying that they're not telling anybody else about it. Because I don't want someone to turn around and say to me, oh, I lost this employee because of this situation. As a listing agent, that's brutal. That's like telling somebody, hey, I gave up all your secrets and we didn't even get an offer yet. So, and that's important to be kind of clear on that. Employee, again, back to that employee retention and transaction. During the transaction, that buyer can keep those employees. Maybe the buyer just wants to simply buy the business and sit back and let the whole thing operate as it's been operating this entire time. And he wants to keep everything as status quo. Well, you don't know that until we're actually in transaction or the letter of intent came out. Again, lease transactions or renegotiation. The lease can be renegotiated, right? It's a whole new buyer. But again, that's a conversation between the landlord and the buyer, and is an agent, if you want to inject yourself. Hey, I see that, 2 doors down, they just put on a big thing where they were offering no deposit. Is that something you're willing to do? Are you willing to restructure how we're paying the CAMs, right? I don't know if many people know what a CAM is. That's a common area management. And that's something that actually gets a separate fee sometimes from different landlords to control the common area. Some put it on there, some don't. So that's a great caveat piece to communicate about. Inventory. On the day we close escrow, I highly recommend to sellers, when they are selling the inventory on top of that purchase price, that a third party company goes out and does a hand count. They will hand count all the inventory and give an exact dollar amount. You don't want to do this prior, because if they all of a sudden do it when we opened escrow, well, obviously your seller's been operating and he's been selling food, selling whatever have you, selling his wares, and that inventory is either diminishing or he's resupplying or he's doing something else. So that numbers can be all over the place between the opening of escrow to the closing of escrow. So the day before, and it's pretty easy to set up. It's kind of like doing a termite report where you just set it up real fast and you give them a call and they come out, sit down with you and go over it. It's real simple sometimes. Closing the transaction. So we're going to ask for a lot of documentation. We're going to ask for all kinds of documentation. We're going to coordinate with anybody that we need to coordinate with. Some buyers and sellers have attorneys that represent them through the transaction, and then they have the realtor transacting it. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that does happen more often than I care to admit to you. And the reason why is because that seller has no earthly idea of what they're doing. So they want to make sure that they are protected. Even though they've already hired you as a realtor, even though they've already taken on the listing agreement, they may put representation in front of themselves. So just be prepared for that. When you do it, there are multiple types of contracts or offers that can be handed to you. There is the California Association of Realtors. There's also the AIR form, and I apologize, I do not know what AIR stands for anymore. I used to, and it's lost in my little mind here. But it does give me, there is an AIR form. There's also what's called a CAB. That's a California Association of Buyers Brokers Association, where they actually have their own separate form. Or the buyer may walk in with a piece of paper. Again, what's a binding contract? Where there's a date, information is being supplied, mutual signed agreement, and monetary compensation being exchanged. Hence the reason why we always like to try to get an earnest money deposit, because earnest money deposit not only shows skin in the game, it also shows what? The realness of the transaction. We want to also ensure that and agree on outlines of assets and transfers. So again, back to the conversation of allocation, payment schedules, all that good stuff. That's going to be all supplied to that buyer at the end. We want to make sure that the buyer understands that, hey, this is what's been allocated out of this entire purchase price. And what is allocation? Why allocate? Well, again, you're buying this business for $100,000, let's say. Well, in that $100,000, you need to allocate out the fixtures, furnitures, and equipment, the goodwill, inventory if it's being sold inside, and if there's a liquor license, what's the value of the liquor license? You don't want to undervalue any of this either, because when the governing bodies like ABC, Alcohol Beverage Control, California Department of Fee and Tax Administration, he bought those fixtures, furnitures, equipment a year ago, and he's selling it for $1,000, and it's really $10,000. He bought it last year. Do you really think that they don't know that? Do you really think they're not going to catch that? And do you think they're not going to turn around and make you go backwards to fix that? They sure will. And they may even call for an audit, which is another 45 days on top of our closing. So which means your poor seller may not get paid for 80 days because of all the try to make it easier situation. So try to be open and honest with it. Try to give real numbers as accurate as possible. And then again, back to the allocation, breaking down the three, right? Goodwill. Goodwill is what is the value of it? Like again, Microsoft, Apple, right? Fixtures, furnitures, equipment. When he walks into that business and here's the fixtures, furnitures, equipment list, what's being sold? What would you buy that at, Mr. Buyer, if you were just to buy these items? That dollar amount will be displayed on the allocation, will be provided to California Department of Fee and Tax Administration and EDD and ABC, and will also be charged in sales tax, right? Inventory. Inventory is inventory. If it's included, it's included. If it's not, it's not. You don't want to underestimate the liquor license. Make sure you kind of do your homework, because a 42 liquor license and a 48 liquor license, while they look almost identical, have very, very big differences. And they actually come at a much different price. I've seen 40 liquor license 48s go anywhere between $90,000 to $120,000. I've also seen where they've sold him 21, which is beer and wine, for 10 G's. You know what I mean? So it's all based upon you want to do your homework with your seller on what that liquor license amount should be allocated at, and that buyer should be listening to you on that allocation because of the fact that you want to make sure it's a nice, clean break. Okay. Managing regulatory compliance. So again, we have to make sure that if your entity is purchasing or your entity is selling, they must be in good standings with ABC. They must be in good standings with the Secretary of State. They must be all in good standings throughout the entire transaction. If for any reason they are not in good standings, then either escrow can't close or the seller can't get paid until they are back in good standings. We also make sure that as far as licensing is concerned, now you may have a restaurant on your hands and that buyer has never owned a restaurant. Does that buyer know that he may need to have a food handling license? He may need to know how to have a food prep license. Does he aware of these things? These are things that need to be kind of discussed with your buyers when they start to give you the letter of intent or they want to engage you in transaction. You want to make sure this buyer is at least somewhat knowledgeable and aware of what they're up against. Escrow is not going to be responsible for those kinds of licenses because we don't issue the license. Only thing we do is verify that there's nothing owing on this business, that business is clean and clear, and here are their certificates clearing them. So to facilitate an escrow process, the process is to manage the trust funds and also to handle the security. We actually created what's called a bill of sale, which acts like a grant deed to you residentials. The bill of sale is actually gets signed, and I actually do a request that the seller do notarize it. And I attach the fixtures, furnitures, and equipment list to that bill of sale because at the end of the day, that is the buyer's grant deed for that business. Okay. And then moving on, everyone. So post-closing considerations, tax obligations, advising the clients of tax sales. So again, we're not a taxing authority. We just follow what's given to us. You want to speak or have a CPA or have a tax professional in your arsenal or in your wheelhouse to aid and assist your sellers. So when they close the business or they're about to close the business, what tax implications are they looking at? What tax implications are their buyer looking at for now and taking on this business? Is there something that gets separated and who handles what, right? Franchise tax board handles your personal property tax, while at the same time your sales tax is handled by the California Department of Fee and Tax Administration. Employment Development Department, EDD, handles your payroll tax. So all these different little entities all have dollar amounts that need to be cleared and make sure that they're done before and after we close. Because when you do get employees, you do turn around and start to engage in more business, the tax liabilities do go up. Non-compete. So we as escrow do not get involved. There's no way we can walk down to a business with our guns a-blailing and say, hey, you can't operate this business because you said that you weren't going to operate this business for 10 miles for 5 years, right? This is the reason why there is a form or document that the buyer pays. The buyer will actually pay for a non-compete at $25,000 for 5 years or 5 miles, right? And if they breach of that, that seller may have to cough up the $25,000 to hand it back to that buyer or more because of the fact that that's what the non-compete agreement was about. Yes, you do not have to put a dollar amount to the non-compete agreement. And yes, the liability to the seller can be tens, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars because again, they breached an agreement between you and the buyer and the seller, really. Emotional consideration. I personally feel bad for a lot of people. Again, mom and pop, right? These people bought a business. They built it. They didn't buy it from another person. They started at ground zero. They're the ones who painted the walls. They're the ones who made the menu. They're the ones who turned around and took a look at this empty room and said, this is what I want it to look like. So there's going to be a lot of emotion in it. And there could be no emotion in it. Some people are completely detached, and they're just like, hey, this is just a simple business transaction. I just want my money and I'm out. So really know what your client's looking for and what your client is about. Again, it's all about the relationships here, right? So we went over a couple of things today. We learned about preparing an escrow. We learned about what we need to take on when we are going to the listing and what we need to collect and give to the escrow company. Again, only escrow, we do pre-escrows. We can walk you through it. We have the forms at the ready. So when you want to get that listing going, get that listing. Let's open the transaction in pre-escrow world. We can start having that conversation of, hey, look, I see this. Hey, their corporation's not in good standings. Hey, I can see, I called EDD and I found out that they have employees or had employees 10 years ago and never paid the tax. And there's penalties and fees and blah, 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 blah. There's a lot that can go into that. And I would much rather, as an escrow person, already have that information, be prepared, than catching all this 10 days into transaction, right? So supporting post-closing transitions are important. Again, the seller is something that's needs to make sure that you and the seller have that conversation. Hey, are you going to train the buyer? Are you willing to train the buyer? Do you want the buyer, or do you want to kind of wish them well? Something that is negotiable between buyer and seller. But at the end of the day, I think it's based upon opinion. Buyers have the right to do whatever they want once they own it, and sellers, well, it's up to them if they want to be the nice guy or be mean, right? So with all that greatness being said, you guys, I just want to know if there's any questions, comments, concerns at this time. Please unmute yourselves, ask the questions. I can't hear you if you're talking.
That was a lot of information, player.
That was
Hey.
a lot of information. Mikey, at the beginning, did you mention when you find the valuation of the business, is it the average of the 3 years or is the 3 years combined?
You take the average. So you're going to take the 3 years, add them together, and then divide by 3. So you can obtain the actual average.
Okay, so the average for, okay, gotcha.
And that based upon that average, that gives you all that great, like, how do I put this? That gives you like the gray area of what the purchase price is. Because a lot of people kind of go, oh, a lot of my listing agents go, okay, I got this business. I don't know how much it costs. Do you know how to figure this out? And I learned over the years that, on average, if they do $100,000 worth of business, well, then it's probably worth about $100,000 because that's how much they made. Some people say, hey, my business is worth $1 million because over 5 years, I make $1 million. So it's all kind of relative. Of course, we all know as real estate professionals that when you've got a price too high, you'll know in a couple of months because no one's talking to you, right?
Got it.
Michael, would you share the list of items that you send to the agents of all the documents they need to collect?
Certainly.
Thank you.
You know what I can do? Why don't we collect emails, and I'll be more than happy to email that entire thing over to everyone. That way everyone can have that information, and that way they can have it at the ready in case you want to save that as an attachment in your emails rather than me put it into the chat group.
That works.
Oh, yes, there is a few people asking for summarizing and a checklist. So we'll send that on an email, right?
Yep, I can easily obtain that. And real simply, you guys, it's the basics, right? Is your seller an entity? You need the entity docs. Is your seller in good standings? The certificate will tell you, right? Every year we get a certificate in good standings. You can go on to the Secretary of State website. EDD, if they have an EDD account, they'll have a piece of paper that says they have an EDD account and what the EDD account is. All that good stuff. And then, of course, I do also have a cheat sheet, like a blank fixtures, furnitures, and equipment list that I'll also provide. It's an Excel spreadsheet, so I often try to email that over to a seller when I do a for sale by owner. I hand it to the seller and say, hey, take a minute, go through this, walk around your business, put it in. I also warned them, I said, don't include things that are not yours, just like a point of sale system or like a jukebox, right? The jukebox is another really important thing.
Michael, I got a question. Actually, I've got a couple of them, but thank you so much for the information and the time.
Sure.
The first one is I'm new to any of this mom and pop business transaction stuff. I've been blessed to just be a part of residential, but just so happened that a couple weeks ago I had a client call me asking me about wanting to sell a business, a mom and pop business. So it was ironic how it worked out. Where do I go to find forms to start the process? So let's say, I know where to go to get a residential listing agreement. I know where to go get a purchase agreement. But for a business, is there specific forms? Is there a different library that we go to?
No, if you are great question, by the way, Alex. If you happen to have if you're part of CAR, California Escrow, or California Association of Realtors, there's actually called a BP,
Mm-hmm.
a business purchase agreement, and that business purchase agreement you can actually utilize. There's also a BLA, or business listing agreement. There's also trying to think of where if there's anything else in car. Car does hold a lot. If you're an air person, or if you do a lot of like, if you're much more into like commercial buildings, a lot of times air. A lot of my commercial brokers like air forms. So you also have air. But again, and what you want to collect from the client when you're starting this process, you do want to collect from them their seller permit. You want to ask the uncomfortable questions. Are you up on your bills? Are you up on your information? Have you done what you needed to do to keep this business going afloat correctly, or are you missing something? Now, mind you, I know for a fact that a lot of people are like, oh yeah, we're all good. And then all of a sudden, no, they're not. So again, pre-escrow does help in that world and that mindset too. Kind
Right.
of takes a lot of that guesswork out. And I often tell people, especially if you're going to try this for the first time as an agent, please utilize your the business purchase agreement from CAR, because it's a more familiar form to you than AIR or from CAB or another like I know Rodeo Realty has their own setup for business entirely. They don't even use any of the following. So they have their own private separate agreements that they utilize. So again, something you need to go to broker with, because again, broker may not have the correct E&O insurance to protect you as a realtor when doing a business escrow. It is not real property. This is personal property. So if you do mobile homes, then you also can do business escrows, because mobile homes are not real property. That's personal property too.
Michael,
Yeah.
can you let them know the difference
Okay.
between bulk commercial deals and when it's just a building?
Oh,
A lot of them, they
yeah.
get confused on that. A lot of them, they don't know. They think the business is the building. So, or separate. So you can explain that to everybody?
Absolutely, Charmin. And everyone, that's my business partner, Charmin Murray. She is amazing, and she does all the closings. So everyone just looks at my ugly mug just for the information. They look to her for the
No,
beautiful
you
check.
take all the credit.
I absolutely do take all the credit.
Right.
But yes, the difference between commercial and a business escrow, right? You hear all the time, oh, I've got a commercial deal going, I got a commercial deal going. Okay, commercial deal, in my mind, you're talking about a real property that has a structure, a building that no one lives in, that's going to literally be a transactional thing with real property. If you're talking to me about a business or an asset sale, that's the kind of verbiage you probably want to put forward. And the reason why is because an asset or a business sale to me, you're now telling me this is personal property. We're not selling, we're not selling the Warner Center, we're selling the Warner Brothers, right? A little different there, but big difference in our world, right? Also, again, asset sale versus a stock and trade. Stock and trade means you're using an attorney. If I own ABC, or excuse me, I'm Mikey Inc., and I am going to sell Mikey Inc. to Charmin Murray. Well, Mikey Inc. may hold, several businesses, several cars, other things that may have that part. And with that, that is actually done with an attorney because they have to do all the micro processes and make sure that the stocks are fully transferred to the new ownership versus the asset sale where you're just selling everything that's inside that building. Any other questions?
I had one more for you, Michael. Again, this being new to me, what is the going rate? And it might be kind of vague, but what is the going rate on a commission that you're seeing on a listing, or is it how is it structured commission wise?
Sure. So in commission world, I mean, again, everything's subject to negotiation, right? I've seen some charge anywhere
Correct.
between 8 to 10% on a commercial, on a business or asset sale, versus in even a commercial building, I've seen up to 8%. I've also seen them as low as 2.5. I've seen them as low as 1%. I mean, it's really again upon you as the agent's sales pitch and your abilities to not voila the seller, but to engage the seller and tell them what value you bring and what value you're worth, right? And I highly recommend to everyone, please go for the 10%. Do the 10%, go for it. And the reason why is because when you discount your fees, they are that seller or buyer is immediately being alerted by your reducing, is that everyone in this transaction is going to be able to reduce. And that's something to be said there because I don't know
that 10% that you're saying, that's per side, or is that for
per
both
side.
sides?
Per side, 20% total.
Per side, okay.
Some will go up to
Thank you.
And again, it all depends upon what you're selling too, right? If you're selling, like I just recently did a boat dock. It was a boat dock exchange company down in Long Beach, and there was a $4.8 million deal right there with all the shipping containers, all that drama of stuff that they're doing, the boats, everything, because the boats were a part of that business, part of that asset sale. Well, I as escrow don't get involved with the transferring of the actual boat, but what I can get involved in is that, hey, is seller prepared to issue out those transfers, those pink slips for those boats, those dock slips to that buyer? And then how are they going to go about getting that taken care of? What are they going to need? That is a lot of time agents have to step in post close to aid and assist in that completion. And a lot of agents charge extra for that. And that is your 10%. It's all about your service.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Mikey, would you tell us what are like the main issues that you find on this type of businesses coming from the agents? Like, what is the due diligence that you think that the agents fail the most to do?
Timeline. Unfortunately, with all asset sales, we have what's called a notice to creditors. That notice to creditors must record and must allow 21 days, physical days of saturation onto public record. A lot of times we get the information real early. We got the earnest money in real early. Everything's going real great. We send out the escrow paperwork. A week goes by. We follow up with the buyer. Oh, I'm working on it. I'll get back to you. Call the agent. Hey, agent, want to let you know I'm still pending this, the paperwork from the buyer. It's been a week. I don't know what's going on. And this is going to delay us. Oh, yeah, we're working on it. There's the landlord issue. There's this. And unfortunately, because there's no follow up with that buyer on the other side, such as like the agents. A lot of agents are scared to talk to their buyers and sellers with our paperwork. I like that. I do enjoy that because I do like the idea that you're going to push your client to me for all the questions of my paperwork. But at the same time, I need your assistance because that buyer has to understand that we need 21 calendar days to do so. And your seller needs to be made aware that, hey, he's got to get his ducks in a row. A lot of times, I just closed an escrow today, a business escrow on a car repair place. And unfortunately, that seller did not know that he had to go to California Department of Fee and Tax Administration to do his final return, even though we stated in the beginning, we stated in the middle, and we stated towards the end. And now I'm holding $126,000 of his money that's going absolutely nowhere because of the fact that he can't give me those clearances. And he found out today that he is now under audit. So now it's an additional 45 days from the day he closed escrow, which was yesterday. So I find that a lot of times agents, you need to stay diligent. You need to stay with your client. You need to make sure that you're walking them through this process. It is a lot more hand holding. There is a lot more hand hold here. It's not as difficult because it's all, once they turn in their paperwork, it's all time, right? It's just we're waiting the time out at that point. But until we get to that point, that paperwork comes back, it should be a 4-alarm fire. It should be constantly, hey, did you get Mike's stuff? Hey, did you have an opportunity to go through it? Did you have any questions about it? Should I get Mike on the phone? Hey, do we have any other issues or situations? Oh, you hadn't had a chance to both sign it? Okay, well, let me see if I can't get somebody to drive over there to pick up that paper to drive it to the next person. I champion one of my agents who literally will grab the paperwork from my hands, take it directly to his client, sit down with his client, go over it. He gets stuck somewhere. He immediately comes right, calls me up on the phone. Hey, Mike, can you explain this to me? Hey, can we go over this procedure? Sure, no problem. I can do that for you. He finishes it right then and there and walks it right back to my office. So that's why I say would be the most difficult part of our transactions, just the buyer and the seller understanding that time is of essence and it's always on their time. But again, as escrow, we are neutral. We're not supposed to push. We don't push. I simply follow up. How's it going? You got anything done yet? What's going on? Agents, you're the ones who could be very more aggressive to them. Hey, Brian, remember you said you wanted to buy this business? Can you sign the paperwork so we can buy the business? Come on, man, let's get it going. Let's get it done. You know what I mean? And that really does help in that aspect. I know it sounds silly because we should be doing that on every deal, but a lot of other, like residential world, it's all pretty much cookie cut, right? The lender kind of does their thing, escrow kind of does their thing, and then you've got your disclosures that keep coming up, right? You got contingency removal for this, contingency removal for that. You have contingency removals for the business purchase agreement, so take a look at that. But in that aspect, you're really not getting a lot done because none of those CRs are of escrow's requirements, right? So that's more for your disclosure periods. So just FYI, keep on top of your buyer and seller. Oh, let's ask another. I got a question for y'all. Has anyone here, and you can raise your hand, has anyone here ever walked into a business and noticed a liquor license on the wall? Right, I have. And the reason why is because they have to display that. So that's a good piece. If they have a liquor license and they're selling liquor, you need a copy of that. And it's right there on the wall. Same thing as the California Department of Fee and Tax Administration, you guys. So there's another one. You can take a picture with your phone and the information's right there. Their numbers, their identification numbers are there. All the information you need is there. Big thing. Make sure your buyer, if he wishes to buy as an entity, he starts the escrow as an entity. Because if your buyer starts as an individual and then goes, oh, I want to become an LLC, well, LLCs take time. And if escrow's already done their due diligence, already sent out their paperwork, already received that paperwork, and we've started the 21-day process, it started with that individual name. And because it's changed now from individual name to entity name, it's a redo. We have to have everyone re-sign it and then re-record it and then restart our 21 days again. So that's a really important piece right there, guys.
Okay.
All right. Again, I see your emails down here, so I'll be more than happy to forward on to you guys my information, my contact information. Should you have any questions, need an estimate, run a scenario. I make a big deal that if you need a scenario done, simply just give me a call. We can talk about it. The moment you put it in writing is when I'm going to turn around and tell you in writing gospel. So make sure if you have any questions about scenarios, give me a call. All right, you guys. I wish you all a great day. Thank you for listening to my long-windedness and my just rambling on. I hope you gained some information. I hope this helps some of you. Do not be afraid. Just ask your broker about the E&O insurance and make sure that you are protected, number one. All right?
Cool. Thanks,
Thank you,
Mikey.
Mikey.
You're welcome, you guys. I hope you all have a beautiful day, all right? And we'll be emailing you soon.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mikey.
Thanks, Michael.
You're
Awesome.
Good
welcome.
seeing you, Eric. Have a great day, Eric. We'll chat with you
Guys.
soon.
Alex, I'm on
Thank
my way
you,
over to
guys.
the
Take
beach.
care, guys. All right.
Thank you, Alex,
Mar-
for joining us. Nice to
George
meet
is
you.
bringing lunch and the margaritas.
Woo! Sounds good.
All right, guys. Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye,
Alex.
guys.
And Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda. Bye-bye. Thank you, Diana, Vilma, Alex, everybody.
Everybody.
Bye. Great information, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.